everyone. Welcome. This is a special webcast program. The title is Human Rights in Russia in the Context of the Invasion of Ukraine. And this webcast is for global exchange with the collaboration of Peninsula 360 Press and Molino Informativo. And we have three very special guests with us today. Thank you for being with us. We will present each of them now and then move on to the presentations or the questions. It's going to be more dynamic. We wanted to start with Andrei Gornostaev, who is a historian of Russia. He has his PhD from Georgetown University and is currently working on a postdoctoral fellow in the University of Toronto. And Andrei, thank you for being here. His interests lie in the fields of Russian social and transnational histories and is particularly fascinated with the stories of ordinary people like peasants or townsfolk, interactions with the imperial state in different settings. Thank you, Andrei, for being here. And we also have María Kuznetsova. She is a spokesperson for OVD Info Human Rights Media Project. And they work with people who have prosecuted for political reasons by Russian government. They cover their stories publicly as they believe that information is a means to defend oneself. And they work especially closely with protesters, and they count the number of people arrested at protests, and they send lawyers to police stations. Thank you, María, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we also have Valeriya Minakova. She is a PhD candidate in Applied Linguistics at the Pennsylvania State University. And her research focuses on indigenous language maintenance in Russia. In particular, she is working with the Circassian community in the North-West Caucasus to understand how the Circassians deal with language maintenance under the pressure of the nation state and globalization. So I think we can begin. The main focus of this webcast is we wanted to really have the Russians' point of view of this invasion. And we thought we could start with Andrei, with Dr. Andrei Gornostaev, who we would like to know from your perspective, what is happening with the relationship between Russians and Ukrainians. Can you give us like a little bit of a big picture of the context, if you will, of the relationship between these two countries and the people of these two countries?
Okay, thank you. Yes, that's a very big question. It's very hard to answer it shortly because there's been a lot going on in the last 30, even 50 years. I can't say that easily. But basically right now what you see is the story developed by the Russian state about the place of Ukrainians and the place of Ukrainian society and what they really mean for Russia and what kind of dangers you can see unraveling in Ukraine for the Russian state. And this is kind of like a narrative that you can really see well in the Russian TV and state because they emphasize that the Ukrainian state right now is actually not run by the democratic government, but by some kind of semi-Nazi coalition of people led by the president with lots of nationalist movements inside the country. And that's why they pose one of the big threats to Russia. At the same time, they emphasize that basically in Ukraine, there's a lot of influence from NATO. So the NATO is an alliance basically is trying to establish its foothold in Ukraine And by doing so, of course, it jeopardizes the Russian security interests. So this kind of rhetoric you can hear a lot on the Russian TV, state news, and Putin advocates that all the time. And they usually trace it to the events of 2014, basically of the so-called Maidan revolution in Ukraine, when the new government came to power. The Russians had a very big, especially the Russian government had a very big problem with this idea of the new government that came to power. And one of the big things that they did in 2014, of course, was the annexation of Ukraine. Well, sorry, annexation of Crimea, not Ukraine yet. So at the time, basically, they captured the peninsula and they organized a referendum that proclaimed Crimea to be a part of Russia. So that happened. And about the same time, a little later, the separatist movements in Donetsk and Luhansk emerged in 2014 that started fighting for independence. So those fights were happening for the last 8 years that they emphasized a lot in the news again. And that's been a very tragic story for sure, because basically it was a fight between Ukrainians who lived in this Donbas region and Ukrainians who live in the other parts of Ukraine. In Ukraine, the perspective was, of course, different because they thought about the Donbas region as their own territory, and they did a lot to reclaim it. And they never recognized the annexation of Crimea in 2014 as a legal procedure. So because of these two places, basically you can see lots of contradiction between the two states emerging and developing over the time. And I guess the idea of the Russian government right now was basically that it was the time to step up and take this territory as its own, or maybe somehow, as they call it, demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. So basically to bring a more loyal government in place in Ukraine in order to influence this territory more or better, or have it under its own control. So these are big political events that were happening. Obviously, the international community never recognized Crimea to be a part of Russia, and they imposed a lot of sanctions in 2014 and later on, basically on the major Russian oligarchs, on some state institutions. And these sanctions were effective to some extent, but not significantly. And basically, by now you can see that lots of those events unraveling, they achieved until February 2022, right? So until the invasion of Ukraine, lots of these events basically were kind of frozen in time and space. And of course, we know from the United States, Pentagon reports in December and January, they emphasized a lot that Russia is preparing an invasion of Ukraine. Lots of people ignored it for a long time, and they said that it will not happen. I was one of them. When I talk to my students in class often, I emphasize that the invasion will not happen because it's so unlikely and so drastic as a measure, and it was most like a political bluff. But we saw in February basically that Russia did invade Ukraine. It did happen. But right now you have, of course, a lot what happens in the social media, in the public space in Russia, that they emphasize that actually it's not a full-scale war, but it's just a special military operation against the Ukrainian Nazis and NATO influencers who work in Ukraine. So basically they're trying to emphasize that actually it's not a war against the country, but it's only like a surgical operation to remove those tumors existing in Ukraine and then bring order and stability to this region. Of course, it's a lot of political propaganda. It's a lot of storytelling, basically to explain to people what's going on from a different position. And they can steal information about public space, about the actual atrocities happening in Ukraine almost every day, and about the activities of the Russian army. I can tell much more about this, but that's basically a very short introduction to the topic.
Thank you so much, Andre. I think what came to mind, and to bring the other guests into the conversation, we would like to know how did the people in Russia react to this, to what you're telling us about the sterilization or the Nazization. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but I don't know, Maria. Like, what do you think how people reacted to this narrative, really, of that Andre was telling us, but it's mostly propaganda and it's deeper than.
Well, I would say
what
so I would say the biggest problem now in Russia is that what we witness is basically military censorship. So it's not like people simply being not like, you know, logically motivated to research something. It's just really difficult to find real information. So people definitely fall into this narrative or that propaganda just imposes, but it's mostly happening because there are no alternatives, because all independent media have already been blocked in Russia. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have been blocked in Russia since the beginning of the war. Of course, people can use VPN and other systems that allow to overcome all these blockings, but not a lot of people know how to use it. So I would say that may explain a lot, and people just so people just basically continue living with their lives. It's not like as we see for a lot of people in Russia, the war is not the main focus now. And I think like 2 or 3 days ago, Levada, that is like one of the independent sociological centers in Russia, they published that around 80% of Russians support support the war. Not like directly. The question was about supporting of Vladimir Putin, but we understand that it's connected. I wouldn't trust these numbers as just numbers, but because like it's still authoritarian country, and it's really difficult, you know, to do sociology. But what we see is a big tendency that, yeah.
Maria, we understand that. Thank you so much. We understand that more than 1,500 people have been arrested for protesting against the invasion. What is the situation of these people?
Yeah, right. So actually, what happens and what we witness is that we had like big protests on the first and on the second week of the war, but now it's far less than before. Usually, what happens with people who are arrested is that they spend a few hours in the police stations, then they go to the court. For some of them, they just get arrested up to 30 days. Others just get fined and that's it. But we also find that there are a lot of criminal charges actually. It's more than 50 criminal charges already on people who protested or published something against the war. So I would say that people are scared because they know they will get arrested in the protests or after the protest, because Russia uses highly developed facial recognition systems that actually allow authorities to find people even after the protest. Even if you're wearing a mask, it's really easy to find you afterwards. So just police visit someone's homes after the protest, find people, and then arrest them for a few days at least. But yeah, so people are scared because of what Andrei also mentioned about having all this anti-war criminal and administrative charges, and we witnessed a lot of that recently. So now we don't have like big protests, and it's just probably because a lot of people either immigrated or are too scared because of all new rules and censorship.
So are we seeing like a lot of people that are leaving Russia for this reason?
It's estimated that around 150,000 up to 200,000 people have already immigrated. And for example, Georgian authorities said that more than 35,000 Russians arrived to Georgia since the beginning of the war, plus 10,000 Belarusians. So what we see now is that a lot of people try to immigrate, and it's not only like political activists or journalists or human rights activists. For sure, it's just a lot of people who work in IT, who work in some, technologies, who work for international businesses, who just want to still have their job, still be able to travel, still be able to, live their normal lives. And also some people who maybe, just mobilized to the army, because in Russia, a lot of young men from 18 to 30, they may be mobilized under Russian law.
Thank you. And Valeriya, what is the relationship between ordinary people in Russia and ordinary people in Ukraine before and after the invasion?
So it's definitely hard to speak for all people. I can only talk about my personal experience. I had friends in Ukraine, and I mean, I haven't spoken to them a lot, especially since 2014, because there were some tensions, because some people in Russia would say, well, it wasn't an actual annexation, people wanted to join, so Russia accepted them kindly. And then, of course, many people, I think most people in Ukraine would say that what was done was illegal, and Crimea is still part of Ukraine. So there were like some tensions, but they were not dramatic. Now, of course, I know a lot of Ukrainians hate Russians, and I can't blame them for that. It's not only because of what our country is doing right now, but it's also because of lack of empathy. I see like posts on social media about how Ukrainians are outraged because, well, their houses are being bombed, children are dying, and then Russians are complaining about how McDonald's is being closed in Russia. So they just can't comprehend that. Like, how can you think about such trivial things when people are still dying? So I think there's a lot of hatred right now. And again, I can't blame them. I think they're entitled to feel whatever they feel. I tried to connect with some people from Ukraine. I messaged them and I asked them how they were, and I even apologized to them because of what the government of my country is doing. We were able to talk, so I'm glad that they don't hate me personally. But I think it's really important now for people in Russia who have connections in Ukraine to message people, to ask them about how they are. And yes, it can be hard, and Ukrainians can say like very mean things right now, but again, I feel like Russians deserve that. So I think it's really important to try and build connections, at least on the personal level. Like on a national level, I'm not sure we will be able to, have any connections in the next, I don't know how many years, 50, 100 years. But on a personal level, it's important to show to people like, we don't want this war. We do not support this war. We are not happy that you are dying there, just to show people that, yeah, not all Russians are crazy. And I've been doing this work. It's hard, but it also helping me, to interact with people in Ukraine, to show them my support. There's not much I can do. I'm in a different country, I go to protests here, but it doesn't matter that much because, I'm not in Russia. But yeah, at least to show them that I care, I have empathy. I know people are dying. I know it's terrible. And I don't care about McDonald's and iPhone and iPad. I care about the people. So I think it's really important to say this out loud, to reach out to them, and show them that we are against this nightmare.
Thank you so much, Valeriya. I think this question applies to all of you. If you want to chime in and and tell us what you think. There seems to be a stigmatization of Russians or against Russians right now in the world in general. And we obviously know that not all Russians are in favor of the invasion, and we would like to highlight this. But how do you feel a bit about this stigmatization?
Maria, your mic is off.
Oh, I don't know. Valeriya, do you?
Yeah, I can start. So I did not experience any stigmatization. Like a lot of people who know me, they actually support me. It didn't even occur to them that I could support this hell because they know me as a kind person. And of course, I'm not happy when people are being killed for no good reason. So a lot of people reached out to me from different countries. I don't know, Australia, the UK, the US, from everywhere, and they supported me. I have a lot of American friends, so they told me that they had similar feelings when the war in Iraq happened. So they had similar traumatic experience. I know that sometimes like concerts are being canceled. When a Russian, say, pianist is playing, the concert can be canceled just because the pianist is Russian, even when people say it outright that they are against this war, but the concert is still being canceled. I don't know. I don't think it's right, because now there's people who express who take a stand against the war, they're in danger in Russia, and then if their concerts are being canceled abroad, I don't know why it's being done and what these people are going to do in the future. I feel bad for them. So yeah, I don't know that. I don't think that canceling concerts, canceling literature, canceling Russian culture is the answer. But again, I can understand how many people feel outraged right now. And again, I can't blame them for that. So I think it's a very emotional decision to say to cancel a concert of a Russian pianist. I don't think it's right, but I can understand why people are doing that.
Thank you, Valeriya. Maria?
Maybe Andrei.
Or Andrei?
Oh, yeah, sure, of course. Yeah. So as Valeriya said about this very correctly, that's morally understandable right now, because basically there's a lot of public outrage about the Russian actions, and there are a lot of people actually even abroad who support the war, and basically they also buy off this Putin's propaganda about what's going on there. So people need to take a stance. That's a very simple idea. Of course, when the public and the Western societies demands that people make stance, it's very hard, and they don't really understand all the ramifications of that. For some Russian people who have lots of ties and connections in Russia, for them it may be dangerous or difficult, and that's an issue. But I would like to bring back a historical perspective on that, obviously. So when you think about this sort of cancel culture, about this aggression towards people who are aggressors right now, and historically, that's very normal. Like when we talked about the First World War, for example, it was happening, there were lots of pogroms, lots of hostility to national groups living in other states. Like the Germans, for example, their shops were pogromed in Russia or Britain at the time. The same happened in Germany. So that's a natural kind of reaction in public society. Right now, of course, it's amplified because of social media. And there is much more information focused on basically what we can do to stop this invasion, how we can show the Russians that they need to act out. And that's a difficult thing to witness, obviously, because culture is not to blame for what's going on. People who actually perform arts or who do sports very often have no association with the government at all, so they should not be blamed. But I think about this as a temporary measure, a temporary public effect on that. After some time, when the war ends, and we do hope it's going to end at some point, it will get better. And of course, it should not be a priority right now to think about that at all. So stigmatization of culture, what they call it cancel culture, that's an issue, but it's not as serious as the war itself in Ukraine. So we should not be so worried about this right now. And I would say that these kind of events, when they cancel Russian events abroad, also highlight and play out for Putin himself. Because in the Russian media, very often, they emphasize that all those examples when the events were canceled in the West are examples of anti-Russian propaganda, anti-Russian Russophobia, or some kind of basically completely anti-cultural, anti-democratic procedures happening in the West at this point in time. So basically, foreign authorities help Russians to build up this propaganda and rally people around Putin because of this inside the country, showing that we need to unite together and actually somehow to act out against all those horrible Western people who want to cancel everything Russian, who want to cancel Dostoevsky and concerts and eliminate all sportsmen from the public sphere.
Thank you, Andrew. Maria, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, we can't.
Yes, I would. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I would like to bring a bit more practical perspective, because I work a lot now with political activists, journalists, all these people who had to immigrate now, and they actually face some discrimination both in Georgia and European Union. And these people, they just had to leave the country because of their active position. And a lot of them immigrated suddenly without having work, having, you know, something prepared and all of that. And for example, a lot of universities cancel scholarships, or I know, like, for example, there is two independent universities in Russia, and a lot of people in position went to them. And now their partner universities in Great Britain just canceled their diplomas that they should like get this summer. So I would say that sometimes this hatred is directed not at people who are involved in, you know, like pro-Putin's propaganda, who does not support Putin. And it's really important to understand that all Russians and all Belarusians who now live in, it's actually important to help them, because they're the ones who will later have to, you know, to restore and to reform both Russia and Belarus when it's possible. These people, well, if they now don't have like possibilities, if they leave politics, we will lose a lot of potential for the future of both countries to be democratic.
Thank you, Maria. All of this is related, and this could be a question for everyone, with misinformation, propaganda. How do you face this misinformation and propaganda in Russia? We understand that media is you only have official media, state media. Do you have independent channels or ways to face or fight this misinformation?
But yeah, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so now all the independent media are closed, and some of them left the country. So there was a TV channel, TV Rain. So they decided to stop working because it was too dangerous for their journalists. Then Novaya Gazeta stopped working just recently. The Echo of Moscow radio station was closed also like several days ago. So I don't know where people get their information now. I mean, some people use VPN and they can see, they can watch you. Well, hold on, YouTube is not banned yet, I think. So many of those journalists who are now whose stations or channels were closed, they're now on YouTube. So they're doing interviews, talk shows, so people can watch them. But then again, I don't know how many people are ready to, you know, accept this information, because I know a lot of people who are now, you know, they just say, oh, it's terrible, people are dying, we feel bad for them, but they're not ready to think like in terms of politics, like whose fault is that? They would just say, oh, it's just so terrible, we want this war to end, but they're not ready to even think about like whose fault is that. So maybe some people are just happy with the TV channels, state TV channels, because they give them the information they want to hear.
Thank you, Valeriya. I don't know if someone else wants to address this question.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would.
yeah, Maria
I
first.
think. Okay, thank you. So I would say that it's really, really difficult to get information that is real. YouTube is really not banned yet in Russia, but as we see, it may be blocked any day. They're just having, like, the government is having a campaign on blocking YouTube now. Probably, I don't know why they haven't done it yet, but it seems they will do it in a few days or in a few weeks. So it's actually the main focus now is social media. So Telegram is not blocked too, and a lot of people join Telegram. And no, it just happened not because of politics, but because when Instagram, for example, was blocked, Instagram is the main source for business to, you know, to get customers, for example, or, you know, just some models and bloggers that are not even political. So for all of them, the blocking of Instagram became a serious issue, and a lot of people turned to Telegram. But the problem here is that we have already seen some censorship in Telegram, for example, last year when they blocked the Telegram bot of Alexei Navalny's team before elections. So it's not, like super secure way to communicate because we have already seen some censorship there. So I would say that also the big issue now is that the government is talking a lot about sovereign internet, as we call it. So it's basically a technology that if they install it, it basically separates into like global internet from Russian internet. And in this way, if they use it, VPN and other sources of just that now help people to overcome blockings, it won't work. So I would say it's a big fear for all people that still work on Telegram, on YouTube, and all of that, because if this technology is enabled, we just won't have any access that is left.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maria. Andrei, I know you wanted to.
Yeah, just a few points to mention. I'm sure Marie and Valeriya know about this quite a lot, but right now I can see a big generational split between the people and how they get information, right? So for example, older people usually they just listen to the state TV media, to TV channels that broadcast the only official position. And what you can see right now is actually very close to what was going on in the Soviet Union, obviously. They only had one kind of news available to the population and only one interpretation of the news available. So they listen to this every day, obviously, and that's what they learn about. Maria is right to mention that there are people, of course, who browse online and find some other alternative sources of information, and basically they can have more positions and more ideas about what's really going on. And there are some issues about this, obviously, too. You have to search, and it's not really widely available to you. There are no different media information like TV channels, radio station that provide different kinds of informations. But I would say the issue here is very often this whole idea of information literacy for the population. Basically, lots of Russians, especially who were studying in the 80s and 90s, they were not trained to look for, even in the 70s, not trained to look for different sources of information. They just don't know how to do it. They don't have the idea that they need to do it very often. So they still tend to rely on what they see on the news channels or on websites like Yandex, which is a big website in Russia. So, and they tend to rely on those news, and basically that's how they make their opinions. And the propaganda in Russia is actually quite smart. I would not say it's totally inadequate. They present a somehow convincing argument about what's going on, for example, in Ukraine, or in regards to Alexei Navalny and his campaign. So they know how to present things and facts in a way that they make sense to the people who don't question them. And to be able to question, you need to learn how to do it. You need to be trained to be questioning things. You need to be learning all these things like critical thinking or information literacy somewhere. And they had very few chances for this in the 90s or 2000s. Because after Putin came to power, basically he's been shortly cutting all those independent TV channels, news stations. In 2012, if I'm not mistaken, they introduced law on foreign agents that made it very difficult for people just to get. So basically they branded and labeled all informational sources that received funding from abroad in any extent, donations or investments, as foreign agents. So basically to some people who lived in the Soviet Union, it became a big indication that those source of information like TV channels, radio stations were foreign agents and basically enemies of the real Russian people. So again, it's a question of thinking and literacy, and basically whether people are actually able to find, or whether they have skills to find what they need to in terms of the real events that are going in Ukraine.
Thank you, Andrei. And again, for everyone, I know it's hard to know, but what do you expect will happen in the next days, months, years between Russia and Ukraine?
I can start. Can you hear me? Yeah, nobody knows for sure, but we all hope that this war will end very soon. What's going to happen after that? I'm sure that a lot of countries and people will be happy to donate to Ukraine to help it rise from the ashes. So I'm sure that Ukraine will build new cities, new towns, and hopefully everything will be fine there. For Russia, I don't see anything positive, unfortunately. It hurts to say that, but I think it will be isolated from the rest of the world. People will get even more poor. We have a lot of poor people in Russia right now, so it will only get worse. So until the current regime is still there, I don't see any bright future for Russia.
Thank you. And we have a question from
I don't know if someone wanted to.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Vinny, I can continue on that, basically saying about the war itself. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen because as it's difficult to the events of the war, we don't really know a lot what happens on the ground. And when you think about the campaigns that are going on right now, we have two propagandas. So basically, in Ukraine, they have their own department that talks about the war in one way, and they're trying to boost morale of their soldiers and people, basically, that are fighting against the Russians. In Russia, they have different propaganda. So it's really hard to know what's going on in terms of the actual war campaign right now in Ukraine. And for example, unlike the Ukrainian side, the Russian side is actually concealing information from the population. They don't tell about the successes a lot. They don't tell about the events of the army. So we don't actually know the real unraveling the military campaign right now in Ukraine. So we just have some indications based on the satellite images, on some informational sources from Ukraine that talk about this, but not a lot. And of course, you can hear right now, Pentagon is saying basically that the Russian army is frozen. It's not actually able to advance anymore into the core territories of Ukraine, like Kyiv and others. So basically, there's indication for Pentagon that it means that the war is going not really successfully for Putin and his government. Again, it's hard to say right now anything about this, but the feeling, because the advance is actually not so rapid of the Russian army into Ukraine, the feeling that the campaign will change somehow very soon. Maybe they will maybe we'll refocus on the Donbas region in the east and just try to conquer it and maybe somehow liberate it, as they would call it, obviously. Or they will try to conquer some additional territories in the south of Ukraine, like that are adjacent to Crimea. So it's hard to say right now, but I don't want to make predictions about this, but my impression that the campaign will end within a month or two. That's my prediction right now.
Thank you. Maria, do you have any?
No, I just wouldn't actually add anything. It's really hard to predict, except for like Russia will be in isolation, and we just hope that Ukraine will be in a better position than it was. Yeah.
We have a question from the audience. So for people around the world, not only in the US, which do you think is the best way to show support to people both of Ukraine and Russia that are suffering from these violations of human rights during this context and this invasion?
I think it's really important to be active on social media right now. And it's a funny thing to say for me because I haven't been active for years, but when the war started, I decided that my voice is the only thing that cannot be taken away from me, so I'm going to use it. So when somebody from Russia or from Belarus expresses their support for Ukraine and they say they're against the war, and I know how dangerous it is for them to say this if they're still in their countries. So I would go and comment on their post on Facebook and say like, good job, I agree with you. And I know it's silly, but people read those comments, So I think it helps them to know that there are people who think the same way, who support them. Because then there's a lot of other people, I don't know if they're paid for these comments or if they really think so, but they would say like, shame on you, you are a traitor, stuff like that. So I would say being vocal is really important right now. What else? Well, I would say donating money to organizations like OVD Info, but then because I don't think people from abroad can donate money. I tried and my card was denied. So yeah, I think the only way now is just being vocal, not being silent, if you support Russians or Ukrainians, say it.
Yeah, I would actually agree. And now you can donate to organizations like OVD Info and others like Medusa and all of them from abroad. We actually had to close donation inside from Russia. So now our only source of financing is like people living abroad. So because of all, like the problems with transactions, Visa and MasterCard left Russia. So now it's really difficult. And I would say that generally sharing information is really important. I definitely agree. For example, Russians who are staying inside Russia, for them, it's really dangerous to post anything about process because they may be arrested for that. So, for example, because I stay abroad, I do that. I just post for them because I know that this information is important, and because I'm safe, the least I can do is share information that they will see, and that is important, but that they cannot share themselves for security reasons. So yeah, so just sharing and just showing people it's normal not to support the war, because for Russians, I would say, like, those who stay inside the country is just a huge pressure because they start to believe that maybe they are the ones who are crazy because they're not agree with the majority of the people. So it's really important to show that they're not the only ones, that they're normal, that it's just the opposite side that is crazy, actually.
Yes, thank you, Maria. I think we can post under this publication the way to donate if someone wants to OVD Info. I would like to just close if anyone has like final comments, or Andre, if you wanted to address this question or
Something that we didn't ask, maybe, that is important to mention?
I mean, we've heard a lot right now about basically people in Russia just not, especially in the United States, when you have the society of democracy and that where you're allowed to protest and demonstrate openly outside. We've heard a lot of the new, basically in the public space in the States, that people in Russia needs to somehow get themselves together and start acting more actively or more aggressively against the government and actually really becoming vocal inside the state. I would again try to emphasize that Marie said, protesting is actually very difficult in Russia. It's very challenging. There are real repressions, really dangerous for people to do that. And it's not just a danger for you, it's a danger maybe for your family, who really knows how it's going to happen. Predictions are not great about this. So it's a very different story to be active and activist in a democratic society, in authoritarian society like Russia. So people just need to realize that and be a little bit more sympathetic and understand the challenges of actually doing the work that OVD Info does or some other organizations that I still operate in Russia do. So that's very complicated, first of all. And as Valeriya and Marie said, basically, empathy, donating money, being vocal online on social media, talking to your friends, explain what's going on in a very rational manner just is very helpful. And it's important not to be ignorant and think that it happens somewhere far away from us, why it should concern us in some way. It does concern everyone basically about this, because you need to think about the events in Ukraine more globally too, economically, socially, what it means for the world order, what it means for the stability of the region, basically. So there are lots of consequences that we still don't really fully realize that may happen if Putin is successful in Ukraine. So you need to start thinking about this more, and basically about what consequences could be for, let's say, South America, North America because of this. And it's not just oil and gas that may increase in prices, or actually increase in prices. It's much more. It's the question of freedoms, question of liberties, what you're allowed to, not allowed to do, how the state behave right now. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. So you need to start thinking about this more openly, donating money, helping others if you can. So I'm going to stop here.
Thank you so much, Andre. I think that was very good that you point that out. I want to thank all of you for you. There was a comment that says, "Thank you for your courage, Maria." But the three of you are Russians, and and even coming on the show, I can't imagine what the courage it takes to do that, to come here and speak. So I don't know, does anyone have other final comments? Valeriya, please. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to highlight that it's a huge human tragedy for both countries. I know a lot of people are sympathizing now with Ukraine, and yes, we should do that. But it's also a huge human tragedy for Russians. And like Maria said, I also know people who are, well, of course, against the war, but they feel like they're the ones who are crazy because so many people around them, like their families, their parents, they would support the war and they would say that they're traitors. You know, I also feel like no, I don't feel that way. That's the way my government wants to position me. I'm a traitor of this country, but no, I love this country. And that's why I feel so bad because of the things that are happening, you know. So yeah, before you judge anyone in the story, just think about it like it's a huge human tragedy, and yeah, try to find some sympathy maybe for both sides.
Thank you. Maria, do you want to do you have a final comment?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with all that was said, and it's just really important not to like count all Russians or all Ukrainians for one side. It's definitely much more complicated story, and it's a tragedy for the region. It's tragedy for Ukraine. It's strategy. It's a tragedy for Russia and for Belarus. Actually, not just even two countries, but at least three of them. And it's what will stay with us for decades, actually, in this region. And it's what will be written in the books. It's just a war that is as important. This war for Ukraine is as important as it was the Second World War. They just feel that it's kind of like the war for their homeland, for their motherland, if you say that. So it's just a big human tragedy, and we should be empathetic with these people. And it's not easy from both sides. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for this, for being here, for expressing all of your thoughts, for giving us this context from a different perspective. I think, at least on in the West, and whatever the side of the globe is. You want to?
No, thank you so much for being with us. We hope that you, if you are listening, please share this link, share it with your friends. Thank you for being with us. That's it.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas
Gracias a
because
ustedes.
all of you speak Spanish.
Poco.
We need to learn Russian. How do you say thank you in Russian?
Спасибо.
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 De nada.